Monday evening, Martin Luther King still a theme, you know, Black History Month still going on.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So forgive us, I'm not really looking for permission or really apologizing, but it's kind of a way of getting into this. Oh my gosh, this might be our second conversation that has a flavor of Black History Month in it in a month. Oh my goodness. I just think that we are, the further away we get from one of the greatest leaders of all time, and as the conversations about, you know, racial relationships just kind of string out, we pay less and less attention to some of the broad concepts. And Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter was here in town a couple of weeks ago, and we've got a terrific guest to talk to us about that visit, the poignancy of it, and whatever else is on his mind. The term multicultural comes up in this conversation, and we'll discuss what that means. Do not roll your eyes. Great to have you aboard, though. Monday evening, lots on our mind. Weekend brings a lot of things, and the Supreme Court just made a decision today. Look at this headline. I was just going to touch on a couple of items before we bring my guest in here. So on DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, we've got a unique situation going on here where we have a deadline coming up next week, March 5th, for some processing of these DACA young people to be, you know, not necessarily shipped out, but to lose status, and they had until March 5th to have all their stuff in, and there's some who qualify and some who don't, and I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details here, but a federal judge in California stepped into this and prevented the administration from exercising its new policy on this deadline, right? So the administration went to the Supreme Court for relief, and the Supreme Court said, we're not your relief. We're going to let the lower courts decide, like we always do, and this will process right through the middle appellate courts. We're not getting engaged. So what does that do? Well, in a way, it brings more shoulder shrug from DACA students and young adults. They don't know what's coming next. And it provides Congress with more breathing room to pick their nose over the whole thing, because they're not going to do nothing unless they've got an urgent deadline of like 6 hours from now. So while I understand what the Supreme Court did, and the White House might be a little miffed, all it does is create more punt environment here. So that's the way the world works in a democracy, I guess. Listen, speaking of democracies and non-democracies, the Olympics merge everybody, right? And so it was, it's being characterized as a very political Olympics. Well, in a very different sense. Maybe heads of state, and you know, they're 2 rows apart, North Korea and South Korea, and a vice president at the beginning, and now Ivanka Trump at the end, and you know, they're not really talking to each other, whatever. But that, you know, a political Olympics, we've seen political Olympics before, and we've canceled Olympics for political reasons. So let's not get overexcited about the politics of the Olympics. Although I will think that if they capitalize on some of the North and South Korean cooperation in a short period of time, it very well may have an impact on lessening the tension. If they wait, not unlike, say, gun safety debates, time passes, people forget, and we go right back to the same old rigmarole. So we'll see. I would think the next 30 days will matter significantly in that. Speaking of Ivanka, she was available to NBC over the weekend and said something that her father may not be very pleased about. She's suggesting that perhaps we really need to think hard about arming teachers in the schools. To that, I respond with a pretty clear, duh. One of the single dumbest ideas I've heard come out of the White House, whether it's Donald Trump or anybody else, arming our educators. Dumb. I don't care that there's the gym teacher who's got a concealed carry permit for the last 15 years. No, 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 that's not the solution. That does not define the schools as hardened targets versus soft targets. If we want to harden the targets, let's harden the targets with trained law enforcement, real strategies, security systems, and the like. Dumb. She knows it, and she's more or less saying it. In the meantime, when she gets a question like this, a little bit more difficult, I think, hey, your father fooling around with all those women? She took a little umbrage with the question, and I understand. She's her father's daughter. What daughter wants to concede to the concept that her father is running around? But you know what? When you have nepotism in the White House, you put yourself in a position to get the question. If you don't like the heat, get out of the kitchen. And this kitchen's full of people who should not be there. Just saying. All right, so that's kind of what's going on a local basis. So here's a pamphlet from the press conference that I just came back from. Roll a little on this, Eric. It's the stadium project we're talking about here. And Build RI is an organization of labor and management construction trade organizations. They had a press conference and they brought Joe Fleming, the top pollster in the state, in to explain the numbers that he generated on this whole thing, and it's very interesting. We will detail all of these questions and numbers coming up on the Wednesday show when representatives will be here to discuss it. But it's exactly what I thought it would be. A real poll that when you ask the question, hey, you want taxpayer money to build a new stadium? Guess what people say? No. If you say, hey, you know we're already in a public-private partnership with Paw Sox and we already have a taxpayer investment in the stadium, people say, huh. And then when you say, hey, would you like to continue the public-private partnership? They go, okay. And then when you say, more taxpayer money, they say, no. And then you say, well, guess what? Here's how it works. They're putting in more money than any other team in the league, and it pays for itself. You know what they say? Okay. It's the polling data, which we'll go over all week, I'm sure, on the radio and on the television, is duplicate to everything I have said about how the public pulse on this question is. So we'll see where it goes. Mike Sabatoni, who heads the labor group and is an officer of Build RI, talked to me about it earlier.
I'm pretty proud of the building trades, our contractors in the past, I'd say 3 or 4 years, to actually collaborate with business and the chamber on things where we have commonality of interest to make sure that we continue to pursue those items. So, you know, business and labor are on the same page. Usually it means that it's something that's worthwhile.
Right, so he's talking about their role in funding this project. I'm sure there will be the typical, labor and self-interest and jobs, and sometimes that's true, and sometimes the project's bigger than that controversy. We'll look at it over the course of the week. All right, so Ms. King was in town here a couple of weeks ago. Here's a headline that kind of covered the situation, and my guest this evening is Ralph Tavares, who is the Assistant Dean and Director of Multicultural Student Success at Providence College, which is a very long title.
Very.
Congratulations on that.
Thanks a lot.
What's multicultural mean?
Multicultural, I think, in the vernacular of higher education, really means students of color. So you're talking about AHANA, and the breakdown of that is African, Hispanic, Native, and Asian American students. So basically non-white, as they define it when students apply on the Common Application.
It's a word that is used more and more, and I think it's for some reason, I get a lot of pushback from everyday folks who will listen to the radio and they hear conversations about multiculturalism and the like.
Sure.
Is it something that people misunderstand? Is it overused?
I think it is.
What is it?
You can even talk to people that do the kind of diversity and inclusion work that many of us do, and even the term multicultural to some of us is kind of dated. Some of the terminology that we use now is diversity and inclusion, diversity and access, and serving underrepresented and underserved students. So there's all ways of saying it, but it's basically our students of color and our first generation college students.
So what do you do at PC to deal with all of this?
So my role at the college specifically is working on retention and making sure that the students that come in graduate. I was a PC grad. I graduated in 2001, English major with a concentration in Black Studies, Women's Studies, and Business Studies. And when I was a student there, I was a recipient of the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Program. And remember meeting with my dean, and remember that dean helping me facilitate conversations and the challenges of being an undergrad student in a world that was very different than the world that I came from. I grew up in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Her name was Dr. Walesi Kamashong, and that was my go-to. And now it's I can't do the math, but it's a couple years later, and I'm now that dean of the entire scholarship program. So I'm now that mentor to some of the younger students, making sure that they know how to navigate the space, going to class. Some of it's kind of kicking their butt into the classroom and saying, hey, what are you doing? And having some tough talks and tough love, but it's all love. And
right.
we just make sure that they get out.
When we come back, we'll talk about the visits and our guest perspective on it. Stay with us. So when you get visits like this from Ms. King, I mean, this is, there's still a star factor, right?
Yeah.
To all of this. What's more important, the fact that she's a star or the conversation itself?
Oh, I think a little bit of both. For me, I mean, I was a bit starstruck being on stage with her and you know, having the opportunity to have a conversation with her. I mean, here sits the daughter of the person whose scholarship I was a recipient of, and I mean, the person who made the pathway for many students possible. So I mean, I think
profound for you.
Yeah, that's a career highlight. Like, that'll go down forever and ever as one of the highlights of my entire career. I think sometimes when we talk about some of the work of diversity and inclusion, it's tough getting different people at the table. In other words, you have a lot of activists that are on campus. You have a lot of students that are kind of working towards progress. And a lot of them are usually at the table with regards to some of these programs and initiatives. And I think having a name like Bernice King is universal. I think everybody knows who she is, or at least knows her dad and knows the legacy of her dad, that it kind of drew in many people that have never been a part of that conversation. So we had bargained, or we had planned for maybe 1,000 people to show up at the convocation event that we hosted, and we ended up having to set up 200 more chairs, and there was still standing room in the back. So
you had a good buzz, good energy.
Yeah, it was good.
Talk to me about the acumen of the college student today, minority or not, about the civil rights movements.
Well, I think much of what is known is kind of the mainstream, you know, the main players, you know, Dr. King, Rosa Parks. I don't know if many people know all of the roots and all the stories. I don't think they're very aware of Emmett Till. I don't know if they know about Bobby Seale and the things that came even after Dr. King was assassinated. So I know that, you know, I remember being a student at PC, and we had the development of Western civilization, and they start from BC and they go all the way to present day. And there wasn't, you know, I don't remember there being a huge chunk about the civil rights movement and black history during that curriculum. And then it made me think about my high school education and even beyond that earlier. And there wasn't a lot except for, again, those main people that you always hear about. So I remember being as an, you know.
Whose job is it? Whose job is it? Is it the public school system's job? I mean, I saw a headline this morning that there's less and less teaching and understanding of the slavery issue in the country. I mean, we're getting further and further away from it, and there's less and less attention paid to it. Is it the taxpayers' responsibility to the public schools to do a better job here? Or is it the responsibility of the private sector?
Well, I was a private school student, so that, again, that curriculum that I got, it didn't really go in depth into the civil rights movement or things like that, just kind of the surface level stuff that we usually talk about. I think it's a charge for college administrators. I think it's the job of curriculum people that map out what the learning objectives of some of these programs and courses are. We just have a responsibility to teach the right history. I mean, I think about when I was a young kid in grade school, and the Thanksgiving that we celebrated and the history of Thanksgiving is very different than what we're learning now. I mean, now we're hearing all about Christopher Columbus wasn't such a good guy. We're hearing about how colonization was not always the best thing. So we owe it to ourselves to kind of write history and learn all the inner details, not just the mainstream that gets kind of blanketed over. I think Bernice King was a great intro to many people to start that conversation.
What was her message?
Well, her message was about her dad's vision of a beloved community and what that means, and how do we, as a community, especially in a world that's divided as it is right now, how do we come together? How do we look past race and ethnicity and religion and all these things and really become a beloved community? And she just talked about the importance of love, the importance of dialogue, the importance of sitting at the table and respecting everybody's humanity. We may not have the same opinions, we may not have the same views, but as long as we're at the table, as long as we're having the conversation, that's the beginning of it. It's not easy work, it's not always pretty, it's sometimes very ugly, but it's the fact that you stay at the table and engage in conversation even through difference.
We should talk about how ugly it's gotten, because while we've made a lot of progress, I don't think conversations are very easy these days. We'll be right back to talk about that. Stay with us. So this, conversation in this particular story, which is worth a read, and I mean everywhere we talk about free speech on college campuses and the tough conversations that occur. I mean, look, do you agree with me, just on a general basis, that we got a little bit of a tension convention on race in general in this country right now?
Absolutely.
That even though there are basic things that have improved, like the things have improved, things that should just have been improving, but the more, the more nuanced stuff is getting more and more difficult to talk about because people just don't want to do it. Your take, and then we'll talk about the campuses.
Sure. Yeah, as I said,
it's exhausting for a lot of folks.
It's exhausting as administrators that are constantly kind of doing the work. It's exhausting to be students that are kind of the target of microaggressions, macroaggressions, flat out hate crimes that are happening. I mean, you see. I'm trying to remember the college. I'm going to blank, but there was a college that, the noose was hanging from the statue. There was, we had our own incident with a Snapchat, and there was the N-word used, and it turned into this whole campus eruption. So, yeah.
Were you on top of that one?
I was not on top of it. My role, I was there for the students as a support. There are people who get paid way more than I do that got to handle the intricacies of all that. But my role is really to make sure that the students were okay and that they were feeling heard. But it's not easy. It's ugly. It's messy. It's weird because you think of college sometimes it's like a social experiment. You have everybody from all these different states and backgrounds and stories and whatever. And it's like, what happens if we throw them all on a campus and see how they play? Everybody's different biases, different stories, whether you're black, brown, purple, whatever, they're all going to start to play out. And you just have to be there as leaders on campus to help facilitate that.
You worry about free speech on campus, as the headline reads? I mean, it seems to me that, surprisingly, over the last 4 or 5 years, the more liberal minds have become some more of the closed minds when it comes to speaking your mind.
Well, I think what happens, it seems like, and I have to read up on my own stuff, but it seems like free speech has now taken on this white nationalist undertone in a way, where you have professors and students that are kind of speaking out, and then you have the very extreme side speaking out too, and then people who are kind of all for diversity and inclusion are like, hey, you can't say that. And it's like, well, they can, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make what they're saying right. It doesn't make it ethical or
but
just.
I don't know if it's just limited to white supremacy. I mean, look,
some of it.
There's some of that there are conservative speakers in this country who have been booed or banned on college campuses right now, and I don't think they fall into the category of white supremacists.
No, I'm not saying that all of them are.
But that's what's going on, I think, and I think somebody needs to take a step back and remind every college campus. I'm not talking about PC. I'm just talking about everybody that's supposed to be an incubator for thought from every direction.
Sure.
Yes.
I think the problem is sometimes when people speak out. And there's, again, you got to go back to think about the leadership and the people that are helping to facilitate that free speech. So no matter what side is saying what, these are college students. I tell my students all the time, you're here as a freshman. You're not an expert in your field yet. You hope that the leaders...
Nor will you be when you graduate.
Exactly. I'm still working on it.
Right.
you hope that the facilitators, the faculty members, the staff members, the administration are there to help facilitate that growth and that dialogue and that talk, you know? And that's difficult because even our professors, even the administrators have it from a certain lens and a certain vantage point where they have blind spots. You know, I work very closely with our students of color and our first-gen students, so my lens is very pointed towards their experience, and it was my lived experience when I was an undergrad there. So my blind spot is probably in places where others are not, so I'm always doing the work from that vantage point.
Is the minority students' experience on campus that different from white kids?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. Gosh, I mean, where do you begin with that one? I'd say come to campus and interview a couple of students. They're just, I mean, I remember, I could just tell you from my own stories of when I was an undergrad there. I got profiled by safety and security because I didn't look like I belonged there. Oh gosh, I mean, you get the Obama question in class and everybody looks at you because you're the only brown face in the class. There are all these little subtleties, all these little things that happen when you're one of very few in a very big white space. And some students have a very easy time navigating that, some of them do not, and sometimes it's outright hostile. So it is different. It is different.
I'm just picturing the situation where one or two black kids are in a class and conversation comes up about the president, as you say, Obama, and I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And depending on what the actual conversation is about, will amplify or negate the need to recognize that there's diversity in the classroom.
Sure.
But it's very hard sometimes to figure out on either side of the aisle when you need to recognize that for the sake of it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, well, let's see what the black kid thinks. You know, that's what you're talking about.
And that's what happens a lot of times.
And they don't necessarily want that question or that pressure. They just want to be able to soak it up like everybody else.
Exactly.
Right.
You don't want to be the representative of the entire black race when the question comes up. You don't want to be assumed
and so
to be an
that's what you do on campus to try to navigate how classes are taught, programs are run, and how the participants even. That's not an easy, because everything's situational, right?
Sure, and then that's not my role. My role is really
just to advocate for the kids.
One-on-one mentoring with the students and academic advising and making sure that they graduate. But many times they come into my office and they talk about the things that have happened to them on campus that is not the traditional experience.
Well, just give me 20 seconds on theme of Black History Month. I mean, what does it mean to you, real quick?
Black History Month, it's important to celebrate. I'm glad that there is a month to do it. I'm sad it's the shortest month of the year, but it's at least it's something.
Quality versus quantity.
Yeah. It's important to take time and reflect back and think about the other stories. You know what I mean? Not just the ones that we always hear about, and it's all due respect to...
Dig deeper.
Right, dig deeper.
Good to meet you.
You as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Final word. We had a big game last night in town. Stay with us. Look at this video. This was a barn burner. I have seen a lot of games, but this one between Henrican and Mount Pleasant last night, which we called on the radio, was amongst the top games I've ever seen. Won by Mount Pleasant, 78-76 in overtime. We'll have the quarterfinals on the radio on WPRV coming up on Sunday as well. See you on the radio at 3 tomorrow on WPRO. Bye. Good night.